will now, Meena Acharia, we turn to Nepal. Meena is well known to everybody. She's an academic, activist, politician, contested the elections, and so on. And she's going to talk to us about some of the issues which have been taken up by the women's movement in Nepal.
Thank you. Since we are already lunchtime, so I will be short, but I was told that I will have to speak only on the 21st of this month, so I apologize for not preparing very well for this session. Listening to yesterday and this morning's presentation, I have decided that what I want to talk is women's movement in Nepal, because the other session on women's movement, there's nobody from Nepal on it either. But then I'll try to relate what I'm going to say with the issues that have been raised this morning, which is very crucial for Nepal. The issues of nationalism and women's movement is very crucial for women's movement in Nepal. As my friend from Sri Lanka said that, we in Nepal also, for us in Nepal also, it is very difficult to say at this stage that there is a feminist movement in Nepal. There are women's movements within the left parties, I would call it. But coming on a same platform, women's organizations, mass women's organizations are allied to the political parties. And if our women's movements to succeed, we need to bring them together on one platform on women's issues, on which we have not been very successful. But then all of us together on our one way have raised some issues which are very relevant for all women. And then so I will try to focus on some of the issues we are trying to fight for in Nepal. And then relevance of those issues for liberation of women in Nepal, and in the context of the issues Nigel raised yesterday. So, first thing in Nepal, main issue right now we are talking about legal equality for women. After the democratic constitution came in being in 1991, constitutionally we are supposed to be equal with men. But there is a conditionality which incorporates nationalistic viewpoint in the constitution. And so all citizens are equal without discrimination against race, sex, ethnicity, blah, blah, blah. But then the citizenship will be granted only on the descent, and that is on paternal descent. So before the constitutional equality is incorporated in the constitution, the first chapter is on citizenship, which discriminates against maternal descent for their children, for a mother's child. In Nepal, this is a big issue, and even now the Maoist movement, one of the main platform is nationalism for Nepalese, nationalism of Nepal. And this is because of the historical open border with India. We have very free flow of labor between Nepal and India. Nepalis go to India, that is everywhere known because they form the part of the British Army. But then all our Tarai area was formed from import of settlers from North India, which generated surplus for the timber for building this railways in North India. So all our forests during the British reign was kind of cut down to supply timber for the construction of North Indian railways. So there is a kind of this two-way flow of labor, and it has been a historical fact. And so because of this nationality is a very sensitive issue for Nepal, and particularly in the context of incorporation of Sikkim, the way Sikkim was incorporated in India, the way that the migrants from Nepal to Sikkim allied with the Indian state at that time when this was passed to the parliament passed the law to incorporate Sikkim into India as a state. So because of this historical fact, this citizenship issue is very, very sensitive in Nepal. And since Nepal is a very small country in the context of South Asia, it has only 20 million population. If you contrast that to Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, we are a very small country in that context. So that's why this is a very sensitive issue, and then every political party makes it into an issue. And so now people like me, feminists, are caught between two poles. One, we don't want to be overwhelmed by, as we call it, other population, or we call it, or maybe we shouldn't call it, but then this whole history of Sikkim has touched us. Because I'm laying down very freely, frankly, in front of you, what kind of dilemma I face as an individual and what kind of dilemma the women's movement faces. So it's maybe it's not only my dilemma, but it also relates to other people also at some context. So I want a equal citizenship right from maternal descent. At the same time, what we are told that innumerable people from India will come and ask, because most of the girls from Tarai area are married to India, in India. So if we grant maternal descent, then most of the children who want to get Nepali citizenship will come and settle in Nepal, and then we will be overwhelmed by the Bihari and UP population, and so we'll end up being a Sikkim in India. So here we need very much help from our Indian sisters to solve this kind of dilemma we are in. So this is one of the because we have not raised women's issues, have very rarely raised citizenship issue. Only recently, because there was a bill in the parliament which tried to relax some of the citizenship law, citizenship conditionalities. But then that has been so much debated, so much debated, it is now in the court. And so I myself am not clear how I relate to that citizenship law, because I don't know in detail what has been passed. So right now, after I go back, I am trying to bring out some women activists from our NGOs and try to make out a platform that how we relate to that citizenship, this issue of citizenship, and then afterwards bring it to the larger political audience and then try to lobby the parliament and the parliamentarians. So this is a kind of on the citizenship issue. The next very big issue on the legal front is the property rights. In Nepal, but in the way the Hindu inheritance system benefits in Nepal is that the married daughters have no property rights in parental property, while they inherit from husbands, in the husband's household, from the husband's share. There's all this insecurity that is inbred between us. That is the main factor that are kind of inhibiting us from competition on equal basis with men. And so we have been arguing this. And then also, when you go to the villages, the girls' literacy rate is only 25%. Women's literacy rate is only 25% in Nepal. Male literacy rate is 57%. So it's half of male literacy rate. And then when we go to the villages and talk to various people, they say, why should we educate them? They go to the other house and then we don't have any claim on their income. So, you see, together with this need to marry off before puberty, need to marry off the daughters to keep their honor, they also have this very evident economic factor that why should we educate them on equal footing with boys? Because boys, when they grow up, they look after us. When the girls go and marry off, they look after, they don't look after us, they look after in their husband's household. So this is a kind of atmosphere that third side we have seen also is that about the trafficking. We have been talking about poverty as a cause of trafficking. But why is that the trafficked women come only from the low caste and certain ethnicities mostly, and service caste? Even there are very many poor Brahmins, very many poor Kshatris, but then they don't come from this. Mostly don't come nowadays with this consumerism and demonstration effect. Girls are getting into this kind of activity, commercial sex work. Even their parents or household doing this. And when we ask for why, they said that we want this kind of facility, we want to live in luxury, so why should we do this? So that kind of commercial sex work also is increasing. But the trafficking of girls is very much related to this propertylessness and the need to marry them off. Okay. The kind of any kind of agent who comes from outside the village would say that I will marry this girl to somebody. The girl is raised to expect that she will live on the income of her husband. And so when they see that he has a good income, so they just marry without finding out where he's going to take him, what he's going to do with her. Then they get rid of her and then they marry her off to him. And then after maybe 2 months, he takes him or somewhere and sells her. So this is another. And then when they come back, also this is one of the increasing factors, increasing trafficking. Another factor increasing commercial sex work is that men go and take other wives without letting the new girls know that they are already married. And then so they bring them home, and there is extensive violence in the household because 2 wives and children from the 2 wives or the 3 wives, and then economic resources are very limited. So that there is all the time there is a fight. So one of the wives get out of the household, and one of the major issues we are raising for property rights is that when she gets out of this kind of household, she has nowhere to go. Because once she is married off, her parents write her off, and then she has no right to return to parental household or even to brothers. She doesn't have any economic resources. And then she gets into all kinds of jobs like hotel and domestic service and all that. And then ultimately she's drawn into this commercial sex work. So that's why we are kind of fighting that for property rights in Nepal. The third issue is that violence, domestic as well as trafficking. And this has been recorded very often, and then I don't want to go in detail on that aspect because this is a separate issue. And then another thing I would like to say that structural changes in the economy and access to livelihood sources. That is another major issue. When yesterday Nikat raised that issue that when we talk about whether we should get into the government and whether we should engage with them or whether we can sabotage from inside. But then you see there is this whole livelihood issue, structural adjustment in Nepal, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in India. It is structural adjustment program. But in Nepal there was very little to readjust because we didn't have food distribution system, we didn't have a very subsidized education system, we didn't have a subsidized very health system. So it was kind of it was not the dismantling of the state that took place, but it is the effect of the modernization and the policies that have now been being implemented is that marketization. So Nepal's economy in the most of the hill areas, it used to be, because it is inaccessible. So a lot of it used to be self-sustaining in the sense and food and minimum clothing. Utensils used to be manufactured in the hills and the tarai areas in villages. But now with overwhelming of the plastic and this aluminum utensils, all those service activities have ceased to happen in the villages. Import of the textile and extensive kind of both Chinese and Indian textile have overwhelmed the household manufacture of textile for the village use. And so a lot of people, and then because of the population pressure, increasing population pressure on land, the land has been divided and subdivided. And so now people in the villages hold very little land. Even landlords now do not have more than 5 bighas, 6 bighas of land. On the other hand, commercial agriculture which is developing, which has been monopolized by the elite who are in power, like that has large land holdings which has been excluded from the land reform because it's a commercial and it's exports, and so like tea farming or the kind of coffee farming, things like that, which pineapple farming, they can give more land, large tracts of land for that kind of thing. So all these factors have combined to affect the livelihood of the people in the villages and hills of Nepal, because you see, even if out of 75 districts, 54 districts are accessible by road, but it's only headquarters that is accessible. So people still have to walk for 3 days to go to the headquarters. So this is a very, right now, this kind of marketization per se, it's not even the historical adjustment that we are being affected, all our economy is being restructured, and that has affected women very adversely. So that's why we need to engage with the state so that women's life becomes easier in terms of carrying water, in terms of carrying fuel, in terms of community forestry programs where women have access. And now with the community forestry is supposed to be the biggest success in Nepal because afforestation has increased in last 10 years. But then what happened is that previously the forestry was under the state ownership, and then anybody could graze their animals in the forests. But now with the community forestry, and the community forestry which has often excluded the poor in the village, because you see in the beginning when this whole idea was thrown in the village, then the poor didn't get organized, and because it involved free contribution of labor. So they didn't have free labor to contribute, so they excluded themselves from this community forestry. But now they want to get in, and those people who organize it to community forestry now want them to pay money, 5,000 rupees, 6,000 rupees, which they don't have. And so now they are excluded from these small activities, which like keeping goat and raising the small animals so that they could sell afterwards. And this because of the scarcity of grazing land. So these kind of activities are going on. So I think we could, I see women's movement as engagement in all fronts, not excluding. I mean, everybody should do what we can do to make women's life easier and to change the state policies and state structures where we can. And that's one of the. Then another thing that this I like to discuss this issue of property right in the context of socialism, because you see we have been kind of we see private property as origin of this dichotomy between the public and private. Private in the production and reproduction, material production and reproduction of human power. But then the thing is that when we are fighting about the individual property rights right now in Nepal, and we have to be very conscious that it's not going to lead to solution of the problems of the poor women, problems of the exploited ethnicities. And so we have to be very careful. We need to fight on both fronts. And so this is one of the things, even when we talk about socialist structures, what I see is that as a source of women's subordination, property has been one of the factors, as I see, because of the market and non-market creation of huge value and the exchange value, and then with that goes the public-private dichotomy. So that's why the non-measurement of women's work, all the work women do is non-economic, and the work that's done in the market is economic. It's all related to this dichotomy of production and reproduction. But then when we saw the socialist structures that existed, which were based on the state ownership of property, that didn't solve the women's problems. This dichotomy still prevailed. And so this is the issue that when we talk about women's movement, how we solve this, we need to sort out where we go from here and what is the answer. You see, this patriarchy, which is based on the physical difference, originally, I read some of the literature also that originally it is based on this women's what you call power to reproduce the population. I wouldn't say that this should disadvantage us, this should give us advantage, because men cannot do it, we can do it, so we should have more power rather than being subordinated. You see. So why are we that have been subordinated? Because we give birth to the next generation. So this is and then because sources of subordination arise both in this private ownership of property as well as this physical difference in the nature between men and women that has given. So within the socialist structure, they even more discriminate against the reproductive rights. The socialist theory discriminates more against the reproductive work, because even within the public sphere, all the activities that were teaching, that were services, that were restaurants, cooking, was supposed to be not productive. What is supposed to be productive was only physical production, and then the transportation of that physical product to the destination of youth. So this socialist theory per se does not free us from this dichotomy of reproductive and productive. So how do we deal with this? We have to solve that. And then that's why, with that I think, and then I don't know, I don't have a slide. So I just leave as that, nationalism and this property movement for property rights in Nepal, which both of them have kind of contradictions within themselves, and then we need to grapple with those contradictions and find out our feminist solutions. What are the feminist solutions to that? Thank you.